Hello, my name is Haruka, and today I would like to share with you, how I try to predict the number of errors in English-Japanese translation using some characteristics measurable in source text and individual translators. I have to apologize to you all in advance. This presentation does not include machine translation. As we all know, translators often have to work in this restrictive triangle of time, quality, and cost. What I am interested in this paper is the relationship between quality and time. Let's talk about time first. In TPR, various kinds of time, such as task duration and reading duration, have been investigated, typically through an eye tracker and a keylogger. It has been found, for example, that more difficult texts, source texts, tend to increase the time translators need, and that professional translators tend to translate faster than novice translators. Now, unlike time, quality is complex to define. Perhaps we can simply ask our clients what they think of a translation, or assess the usability of a translated text, or annotate errors with the help of bilingual checkers. We can also choose to have a machine to do things like this. In this paper, I decide to use error-based assessment to define translation quality. Although this type of assessment may have some disadvantages, such as being too static or lacking a holistic view, I believe that it is one of the valid methods to operationalize quality, especially when we focus on accuracy. So most of 2014 suggests that the relationship between time and quality is often a trade-off. And professional translators may intuitively agree to this statement, but is it always the case? Previously, I examined whether production duration, which was defined by the typing duration, was influenced by ST, TT, and translator characteristics. There were 5 characteristics that produced statistically significant results. Among them was the number of errors. Interestingly, the result was that a greater number of errors contributed to longer production time, which is not a trade-off relationship. I also found in the same study that more experienced participants had shorter production time. Then I came to realize that it was perhaps because of an unbalanced distribution of years of experience that I observed this positive relationship between production time and total error count. So I decided to conduct a similar study, now using total error count as a dependent variable in order to examine whether experienced translators produced fewer errors in my dataset. So my research question is, can we predict the quality of translation, defined here by the number of errors, using source text and translator characteristics? And here is how I annotated source text and translator characteristics. Please note that the unit of analysis here is at the segment, which is sentence level. So figurative, for example, refers to the number of figurative expressions in one sentence. D-depth is about syntactic complexity. Long word ratio is the proportion of long words. And prob1 norm is my operationalization of word familiarity. There were 5 translator characteristics: training, experience, L1, and initial orientation refers to 4 kinds of sessions based on how long a participant read the source text before producing translation. And end revision refers to 3 groups categorized based on how much of a translation session duration was used for end revision. So for the dependent variable, I manually annotated errors according to TPRDB's annotation schema and counted errors in my dataset. In this presentation, however, I am only concerned with the number of errors, and this is how I counted. For example, a participant translated this English sentence into Japanese like this. I annotated the verb at the end as a mistranslation because it means arrested. In this particular session, this highlighted part was aligned to was imprisoned, which contains one content word imprisoned on the source text side. So I counted this error as one error, although there are 4 tokens on the target text side. After all, I found 774 errors in my dataset, according to my counting method, mostly accounted for by mistranslation. So I did find a lot of errors, but there were also many segments with 0 errors. So the error distribution looked like this. Therefore, I decided to use zero-inflated generalized linear mixed effects models, ZIGLMMs. This statistical method assumes that some of the zeros belong to the other part of the distribution which contain errors, perhaps like this, and that some zeros are very unlikely to be a part of this distribution. And the latter type of zeros are called excessive or structural zeros. And these 2 parts are analyzed separately. We can interpret the blue part, a count model, as a general linear mixed effects model, and the excessive zero part, a ZI model, as mixed effects logistic regression. So in the context of this study, excessive zeros refer to the segment with 0 errors. So in reality, these are what we would like to observe, although the term excessive may give you some negative impression. In the ZI model later in my analysis, we will see how likely for a segment to be a member of these excessive zeros, and higher likelihood should be interpreted as a positive result. And I use an R package called GLMMTMB for this analysis, and the R code looks like this. My error distribution was over-dispersed, meaning that the variance was greater than the mean. So the family was specified as negative binomial. For random effects, I use text ID for both count and ZI models. To determine the best model, I first put all the source characteristics as fixed effects, then remove a variable with the largest p-value 1 by 1 until all the fixed effects had p-values below 0.05. And I did the same for translator characteristics. I did not create a model that includes both source text and translator characteristics. So let's take a look at the best model for source text characteristics. The count model contained d-depth and long word ratio. This model suggests that total error count increased as d-depth and long word ratio increased, meaning that when a segment was more syntactically complex or had a greater proportion of long words, more errors were observed. Here is a plot that visualizes the result. The green line, which represents the segment that contained more long words, is consistently higher than the other 2 lines. And all the lines go up toward the right side, where d-depth, the syntactic complexity, is higher. Now, the ZI model only contained long word ratio. This model indicates that for 1 unit increase in long word ratio, it was 99% more likely that the segment would be a member of excessive zeros. I know it's complex. That is, simply put, when a segment had a greater proportion of long words, the segment was more likely to have 0 errors. So 99% is a substantial increase in probability, but I assume this was due to the fact that long word ratio had a very small range, which was 0 to 0.5. That being said, the result is still puzzling. How can long word ratio increase the number of errors while at the same time increase the chance of having 0 errors? Remember that excessive zeros are the ones that do not belong to the distribution of errors. Put differently, excessive zeros here in this study indicate the segments that would never have errors. So can there be such segments? In reality, I would say no, because translators are humans and nobody's perfect. And especially in this experimental setting where the participants were not allowed to use any external resources. Now, I personally have never seen this statistical method utilized in TPR, and I am not exactly sure whether this assumption of ZIGLMM is valid or how I should be interpreting these ZI models. So I would love to hear your opinions here today, but at least to answer this specific question, perhaps it might be because many of the segments with high long word ratio values happen to contain 0 errors. So as you can see in this figure, the segments with over 0.4 values in long word ratio only existed here in this red circle, and many of these segments contain 0 errors, as indicated by darker dots. So these data points could have skewed the results. Now let's take a look at the best model for translator characteristics. The count model suggests that the total error count decreased as the participant had more years of experience and spent longer time on the end revision. And this is not a surprising result, but a pleasant result. Also, head starters who immediately started typing translation had the least number of errors, followed by the scanners who quickly scanned through the ST before typing, systemic planners who read the entire source text before typing, and quick planners who read the first few sentences before typing. I personally found it interesting that the head starters made the least number of errors. There was no significant interaction effect between experience and initial orientation, but it is possible that very experienced translators in the head starter group contributed to this result. As you can see in this visualization, these tendencies observed in initial orientation remain the same no matter how many years of experience they had or how much time participants spent on end revision. Although those lines seem to come closer to one another in the right panel, where participants spend more than 25% of the session duration on end revision. For the ZI model, the result indicates that for 1 unit increase in training, it was 69% more likely that a segment would be a member of excessive zeros. Put simply, for example, a participant with 1 year of training is 69% more likely to produce 0 errors compared to a participant with no training. I also find it interesting that experience was in the count model up there, while training was in the ZI model. This result, this result suggests that training can help translators avoid making errors, at least to a certain extent, but does not necessarily reduce the number of errors when they do make errors. Again, there is much room for discussion as to how we should be interpreting ZI models, but in previous research, for example, Shreve 2009, suggests that monitoring, which is one of the metacognitive skills that can be improved through training, can help translators detect errors. So it is possible, in my opinion, that the participants who had more training in this study were able to avoid making errors because of their enhanced monitoring skills that they had acquired through training. So let's take a look at a holistic picture of this study. These check marks here represent statistically significant results. And now, combined with some findings in my dissertation project, my previous research, there were two characteristics that influenced both total error count and DUR, production duration, which are experience and end revision. As I explained earlier, the years of experience reduce the production time and the number of errors. The relationship between end revision and production duration in my previous research was like this. Those who spent longer time on end revision had longer production time. So the present study then suggests that the participant who had a long revision time successfully reduced the number of errors at the cost of prolonged production time. Yep, okay, hang on. Therefore, time quality seems to be indeed a trade-off in my data set as well, after all. So for a quick summary, in this paper, I tried to predict the number of translation errors using source text and translator characteristics, 4 of which produced significant results in the count model. Long word ratio and the training also turned out to be significant factors in the ZI models, but interpretation of ZIGLMMs demands further discussion. Interestingly, and perhaps more importantly, we found that translators' years of experience and the length of end revision can be important factors to consider when one needs to weigh time against quality or vice versa. Aside from the uncertain validity of ZIGLMMs, this study had 2 major limitations. That is, I annotated errors on my own and only examined English-Japanese translation. It is certainly possible that more objective error annotation and data with different language pairs present very different results. Now that we have this publicly available TPRDB, thanks to tremendous efforts by Dr. Koro and other researchers, I would like us to collaborate and discuss even more than we do now to further advance TPRDB together. So here's my bibliography. Thank you very much.
Time for questions. Do you have questions or comments?
What was the data set, size of the data set that you used?
So in this data set, there were 39 participants, and each of them translated 2 texts. So, and Yes. Actually, I had to remove one participant, so there were 38 participants in 2 texts per each.
Text meaning segments, the sentences that
No, I used TPRDB's data set. So there are 6 source texts, each of which usually has about 160 words. Segment-wise, I think from 6 to 11 or 12, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
So I don't, of course, know, I don't know this model that you're talking about. I just was wondering about, you were wondering there are segments with longer words and they have fewer errors. And I understand that was surprising, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, or it occurred to me that maybe longer words are less ambiguous. And maybe longer words, there's less choice. You can make less errors if you know how a term translates, right? Maybe you wouldn't make errors, and maybe that's the reason why. And I mean, what are longer words? Longer words tend to be more precise, have more precise meanings, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And if a translator knows how to translate this, then they would produce fewer errors. Can that be a reason?
Yes, I think so. So in my previous research, I also examined the relationship between long word ratio and ITRA-seg, if you remember. So at the beginning of this workshop, there was a word entropy, right? So ITRA-seg is basically an entropy or semantic complexity at the segment level. So I examined the relationship between ITRA-seg and long word ratio that I used in this study. And the relationship was basically a negative relationship. So higher long word ratio was, hang on. Yes, higher long word ratio led to lower ITRA-seg. So in terms of variation, you're talking about maybe, as you were saying, long words are less ambiguous and fewer variation. That might be the case.
And hence also fewer errors.
Yes. So, okay. Right. I got confused, I'm sorry.
Yeah. This would be also interesting to see on how it performs on German, where it usually has like longer words and also.
That's true.
Maybe like next time we can do something on like language like German and see.
Let's collaborate. I cannot speak German, but yes, definitely.
I'm curious to know. Thank you for your research.
Thank
Very
you.
specific. I really enjoy it. Do you have an inclusion-exclusion criteria for your translators? You were mentioning some with training, at least 1 year of training. So really curious to find out if you did have a criteria for selection.
So as I said, there were in this study 38 participants, and I think the longest experience they had was like 20 some years, but that was the longest experience. there were actually a lot of participants who had zero experience as well. So as a distribution wise, I would say there were more inexperienced translators than experienced ones. But as I said, some participants were very experienced. So I would say it's unbalanced. No, no.
Hi. I have a question about the nature of the text, the specialized or more generic texts. You mentioned translators without experience, which means zero experience in translation, any type of text, or?
No. So the texts used in this study are very general. So there are 6 types of texts, but 3, actually 4, are from news articles, newspaper articles. So very general text. And as for the experience, the question on the questionnaire was how many years of experience do you have, like in general? So there was no parameter for a specific type of text. So most likely those participants were college students.
Do you think results will change depending on the texts? I guess.
Very likely.
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
very
answering my
likely.
question, but yeah, I think it's interesting to measure it somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, so in this specific project called ENJA 15 in TPRDV, we used general text. We didn't have any parameters for participants, but if we, for example, narrow it down to like only professional translators, and maybe we can also ask what kind of translators they are, like legal translators, I don't know, medical translators, etc. Maybe we get a very different result. That is possible.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just going back to the longer word ratio. I mean, just in generally speaking, I assume that longer word are like specialized terminology, like the technical words or the proper nouns. I don't know. It's nice to see actual examples of those.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, that's a comment.
Thank you.
I also have a comment following up yours. I was thinking maybe for language users of different language pairs, they have different sensitivity of the longer words or shorter words because of the nature of their language specificity. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I guess Japanese people are very used to more like longer words.
Maybe. It will be interesting to look into that as well.
Or
but
German people.
yeah,
as
the
just now they
longer
mentioned.
words here means longer words in the English source
Yes.
text.
Yes.
So in case of Japanese, we don't really have like spaces in between
Yes.
each character.
Yes.
So I wouldn't assume that Japanese people are more like used to or less used to long
No
words.
space. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it would be interesting to look into that.
I think Chinese also have the same issue. We don't have a space
Right.
in between tokens. So I guess maybe we're more used to this longer space-wise.
Oh, I see what you
Yeah.
mean. Okay. Yeah.
That's just my comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's, do you have, oh, okay.
Have a quick comment on the German long words.
Okay.
So basically, you could also analyze it from the English source because a lot of the German long words have to do with compounds. So if we have like a 3 or 4 noun compound in English,
Right.
that tends to, become a very long word in German, where we just put it together without a space. Like a gold earring would be one word in German, where you have 2. So you could look at it from the English source as well.
Okay. Thank you.